But I will say there have been some developments in the way the government does promulgate the inflation numbers.
Yeah.
So let's just address those. In January of 2023, this year, we got our first read. So actually, we're talking about February's read of the January data. We got our first read of the new way that inflation is now being tracked. So we already know that it completely changed from the 1980s way. So we don't have an apples to apples calculation anymore. We can't say, oh, in the 80s, it was 18% and now it's 6.4% or 6.5% or 7%, because that is not an apples to apples equation. We know that they changed the equation and they really looked at changing it for core CPI minus food minus energy, which, by the way, are the two most inflationary asset classes that exist.
And what our clients care about.
Exactly. But what they did do is they changed the year-over-year number so that the index before was a basket of 2 different years of the average of 2 different years. And therefore, if you had a third year of inflation coming up, if you're using a basket from 2 years earlier, you're going to have a much bigger jump. The government didn't really like that anymore based on this inflation. This is a problem, is the government is giving us these numbers and they're basically grading themselves on these things. You have to know this. And so basically now we're only getting an index of 1 year prices. And to your point, Shannon, you know, when you look at, like, let's just look at the first part of this year, 2023, when you look at a 6.4 inflation number coming out, but then you say, that's not possible. Look at the egg prices. So the at-home food prices are over 11% year over year. And then if you look at restaurants, they're 17% year over year increased costs. So you can't just look at a top line number that potentially doesn't have energy, food, it doesn't have potential things. And then you look at the Fed now, and they're really more favoring this personal consumption expenditure index, this what we call PCE. And they like that because it broadens their horizons into, you know, expenditures on services, travel, all of these things, instead of just a commodity product of goods. And so it can kind of like thin out that inflation number. So I just want to encourage people to really be mindful of what's going on with these government sponsored numbers that we've used forever, by the way. I mean, it's happening across the board. It's happening across with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the jobs numbers that we're getting. Everything that we're tracking, you know, a lot of things are being tracked to make an encouraging statement where otherwise it would be really not encouraging, be discouraging. And so we just have to be very skeptical and analytical on what they're actually telling us, because we have to read between the lines sometimes.